Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey everyone, welcome to the room.
Give it a couple seconds here, and then we'll go around the horn one more time and do some more in-depth intros if you guys would like, or you can jump straight into the conversation.
For those in the know, since there were questions, I was able to start the recording, so we're in good shape on recording. And Emily, if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of call you out and say, why don't we start with you and your introduction for the room?
Sure. So hi again. If you missed in the last one, my name is Emily Rautenberg. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a UX engineer at Comcast NBC Universal / engineering manager. I currently work on the experience design engineering team, which is very interesting because it's the only engineering team that sits inside of our UX department at the company. So it gives me the opportunity to work both with designers and production engineers and really bounce back and forth. Most recently, I've been leading up the front end development for Flex, which is one of our streaming set-top boxes. I mainly work in JavaScript, and I've been at the company almost 6 years officially. I think that's about it.
I'll jump in real quick then, Jay. Hello again, everyone. As I mentioned, my name's Brian Crumley. I am a senior engineer working with about a 50-person agency here in the Fishtown section of Philadelphia. I've been there for quite a while, almost 9 years at this point. Worn a few different hats over that time. So in the past, I had actually started as a UXer. That is what actually brought me to PhillyCHI in the past. But I also was kind of filling in as a front-end engineer over time. And as the years have passed, I've actually kind of taken both of those skill sets and combined them together. And now the role that I play is typically more of a technical strategist on our projects. I actually work on one of our largest clients on a retainer. So it's cool because I get to go through and kind of use the background that I have both as a UXer and a developer to work more closely with our UX designers, our visual designers, and our development team, really to go through and kind of help set the standards and help them go through and kind of build better products, better marketing websites. I'm able to go through and work directly with our clients to go through and help them make more holistic decisions when it comes to technical strategy. You know, if they have a product and a marketing website and a marketing strategy that they're trying to follow, I kind of marry all of those things together to help them be basically more informed about the technology decisions that they make. And then around the agency, I typically get pulled in as an SME when it comes to things like front-end web performance, accessibility, and then working with our teams to go through and help establish best practices as it relates to front-end development.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Brian. I'm Jay. I'm the quality assurance manager at Promptworks. I mentioned that we're a software design and development consulting shop here in Philadelphia. As a consultancy, the work that we do is similar to what Brian's agency does. The work is not our own. The products belong to our clients. And the reason that we distinguish ourselves slightly differently as a consulting company is that that's also a large part of what we do. We will work with our clients and consider multiple avenues to solve the challenges that they bring to us. Sometimes creating custom software, and many times in the sales cycle actually saying, yeah, you don't need custom software for this, and here are 4 ideas of off-the-shelf stuff for you to use. My background in software development goes all the way back to the 1980s as a power user on IBM PCXT equipment. and being the first major client for what eventually became Great Plains accounting software, one of the largest accounting specific software products in the world, and actually got into the first software development company that I worked for in 1990. Had a sojourn outside software development for 10 years and came back in 2013 into an agency called Damage Control and Tonic Design, and switched over to Promptworks about 2 years ago. My career path has been all over the place, lots of management experience, and because of the type of career path that I have, I've also worked very closely at both Tonic and Promptworks with apprentices and folks who are actually very early in their careers as a mentor. So I have folks are throughout the Philadelphia area who have apprenticed with me, and including one person who's a senior designer. So coming through an apprenticeship can lead to all sorts of possibilities in the tech industry. So thanks very much for joining us in this group. And since I happen to be off mute, does anyone have a question that they would like to ask one of us or a group of us?
Would you all like to introduce yourselves, since this is a pretty small group? Don't all jump at once.
Alyssa had her hand raised. I'm waiting.
I was hoping he would call. I didn't want to like jump in. So I guess I'll just start with the introduction and we'll come back to questions. I'm Alyssa. I'm a UX designer at Message Agency, which is a B Corp in Philadelphia. And all of our clients are education, government, nonprofit. We're a pretty lean team with like 2 development teams and 1 design team. And of course we have like PMs that help navigate some of that structure. And I guess I came into this group in particular for the breakout room because we're interested in like what ways we can include our developers into the UX process, as none of our developers identify as UX engineers. We don't really necessarily have that role on our team, but we feel it would help us sort of create more of that connection, communication, collaboration, as well as help reduce that sort of Frankenstein deliverable for the QA process. Then I pass. Maybe Kieran, you go.
Hi, I'm Kieran. I am in the Philly area. I'm in the process of career switching. I'm in a boot camp right now for UX design. So I've just been going to PhillyCHI events to soak up any information I can about everything. I don't know what like specialization I'm interested in, but my background is designing websites, so I know some like front end stuff. But I guess if I had a question, it would be, well, for one thing, I guess I didn't even really know that there were UX engineers, because there's always that debate of like, do UX designers need to know how to code? So like knowing that there is kind of like a place for people who, you know, can do both. I don't know, it's just interesting. And my other question would be, just like everyone's, it's great that the 3 speakers work in kind of different like sizes of environments, like a very large company and an agency and a consulting firm. So kind of just like hearing how your teams are, kind of what your teams are made up of. That's all.
I can go next if no one else has called it. Hi, my name is Nahian. Super excited to be here. A little bit of context and sort of what I'm interested in here and who I am. I currently am a lead product designer on a design system team. I've only ever worked on design systems. So the whole last 10 years of my career has been on design systems across 2 or 3 different companies. I also am currently doing a part-time master's in software engineering. And I want to say that 80% of my work is actually mostly on code. So I built like our company's design token system that powers like all our products, et cetera, and I kind of manage it. The thing that I'm interested in is my company so far hasn't yet recognized what UX engineering is. It's something that I'm currently in the middle of pitching. So I have a whole deck and it's like a whole deck that has like, here's what it is, here's why it matters, here's why it is a thing. And I get faced with a lot of questions on like, oh, so you're an engineer, you should report to engineering. And I'm like, no, that's not good for me. And then, or, hey, no, you should fully just, be a designer and report to design. And it's like, no, that doesn't quite fit me. So I'll eventually ask more about that. So that's what I'd be interested in.
I can introduce myself next. Hi, my name is Antigone, but I also go by Angie, so please feel free to call me Angie. So I have a background, I have a bachelor's in information systems. So I learned, the front end part of design, and then I also like focused on UX design and research. I'm currently working as a front end developer at Vanguard and also pursuing part-time masters in human computer interaction. And I'm also interested in understanding how to like blend both the technical and design side of UX. I feel like a lot of times people are, tell me you need to specialize, or they want me to choose one or the other, or it's hard to kind of find a place in the industry, because it's either like, oh, you don't have enough design background, or oh, you don't have enough technical background. So I guess my question later would be, how do you find the nice balance and the blend to really be able to touch on all aspects from both the design, research, and technical side of things? Thank you.
Christine or Sam, did you want to introduce yourselves? No, that's okay. All right, I did take some notes on some of the questions and discussion topics you all just kind of brought up. So maybe we can kind of start at the top and go from there. So the things I wrote down were, how do you get developers involved in the design process, especially when there's no formal UX engineer role, which I think ties into where do UX engineers come from and how do you make a UX engineering role? And then eventually trying to talk about the balance of struggling to balance design, research, and development. Are those all good topics to start with? Okay. So since I'm already talking, I can just keep going. So how do you get developers involved in design when there's no UX engineer role? This is something that I don't know what the PC answer is, but for me, I found as a UX engineer, I've had to just insert myself into certain teams and say, design is really important, and this is why you as an engineering team need to care about it. And some of those reasons really come down to, if the design doesn't look good, no one's going to use the product, so you're going to be out of a job. So trying to find ways to talk to developers who might not be interested in design and get them started in the process from the beginning, I think has been really helpful personally in my career, to say, as a designer, we have started working on something. It's not totally vetted yet. It's totally a work in progress. What do you think? What is going to be possible with the code you've already written? How does this affect the project, the scope, things like that? Now I can stop talking and see if Jay or Brian want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Emily, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it. I can certainly vouch for me that it was a forgiveness over permission kind of thing. Like, no one said, hey, Brian, go in and, can you do some UX as a developer? I think the thing that goes through and kind of, I think people go through and be like, well, what actually makes you a UX engineer, as opposed to just like any old engineer? And for me, it really boiled down to like, empathy. Like your traditional developers are really going to be focused on the code and the quality of the code and how they're able to go through and kind of like build that system. But I think UX engineers think of things a little bit differently. You're really kind of looking at it a little bit more holistically as to like, is what you are coding, the best experience for that person. You start asking questions of yourself and of your designers and of your fellow developers about, is this the best thing to go through and represent this functionality for a service or for a website. So I mean, like, I think people look at like what skills is it that goes through and separates you, and I think it's more so just about your thought process. It's how do you go through and think about the things that you're going through and building. UX engineers tend to think a little bit deeper about these kinds of things, and it really starts with going through and just being the person that asks the questions. Do you have the documentation about a specific component or a specific product that you're building to understand like, what is it that I'm building? What is the end goal in this? Is this particular interaction going to be the most appropriate way of conveying information or getting what the user needs, at that moment in time? Like I said, with the forgiveness and permission kind of side of things, I just straight up started having conversations with the people on the team about this kind of stuff. I think don't feel like you need to stay in your little developer lane or your UXer lane or whatever it might be. Hopefully you work in a team that goes through and appreciates that level of collaboration, where you can go in and have an honest conversation about like, hey, I was looking at this and wanted to understand a little bit more about what it is that we're building, or what is the intent with how someone would go through and use this particular component or this particular page on the site. And that really just kind of gets the conversation going, so that people start to think a little bit deeper about these kinds of things, and start to actually take advantage of the different skills and different mindsets that people bring to actually developing what you're actually working on.
Yeah, I like your use of the word collaboration, Brian, because that's literally how I got into having a close relationship with UX and UI. I think I mentioned that I started in the IBM PCXT world. I moved over into Wang Mini Computers from there, and I'm very accustomed from early in my career to the glowing green letters on a dark green screen, and that's all that anybody thought computers were going to be for a long time. As graphical user interfaces and all the tools that came with better screens, better monitors, lots and lots of color usage, we went through the ugliness of the GeoCities of the 1990s and apps that looked like that for a long time. So I've been really fortunate to both grow with the industry and also grow in my understanding of what makes an application easy for the user to work with. And the way that I landed into QA is the fact that I am the type who is going to press all the boundaries, including the UX and UI components of the application, and say, hey, look, did you know that when I literally had this example, when I fill in this field and then hit the submit button, for whatever reason, the text here literally just jiggles a little bit and then everything finishes, and be able to point out and notice that there were some things going on that just were not pleasing to the end user. So my goal at all times is always the question, what makes this the best UI UX for the end users of our software, and guiding folks to be able to engineer in that way. Promptworks, we have one person who is very focused on front end only. Everyone else is a full stack developer in our engineering team. And so we do look to our designers. We do have 4 folks who are specifically in the design team. We look to them for their guidance, John for his assistance when he's on a particular project with us. But all our engineers really do have a care and concern about the ultimate presentation and understanding how to present things best to our end users.
Cool. So I think kind of going back to Alyssa's initial question is, how do you get non-UX engineers more involved in the process from the beginning, right? So I think we talked about collaboration. I would also say in my personal experience, I've worked with a lot of designers who don't like to share their work until it's totally done. And I think everyone on this call probably knows that design is never done because they're always going to keep pushing and making tweaks and changes and decide, let's move this one more pixel at the end. So trying to encourage designers on my team to be more open from the beginning, I think has made a really big difference, because then even if you preface the work as saying this is, not finalized, I think it gives developers just a little more insight into what's coming and make them feel a little less blindsided later on when all of a sudden you drop a new feature and say, okay, and can you deliver this next week? So I think that's a big piece when you don't have traditional or formal UX engineers to play that role and be the bridge between those two, is just how do you get everyone together in a room and say, all right, we can't have this gap anymore. How do we get on the same page?
Yeah, I would say that we also started going through and including like the entire project team as early as possible in the process. So to try and avoid that scenario that Emily kind of touched on, which is like, the designers reach a perfect state and then hand it off to the developers. And now the developers are basically like, okay, all the decisions have been made, all the all the thought process has gone into it, and now it's basically like, okay, now code people go make my creation, as opposed to allowing for them to kind of be there along for the ride and answer, ask their own questions and kind of provide their own feedback along the journey, which I think has been a huge differentiator for us. Having them feel like they have a sense of ownership of the process and the process as early as possible.
I wanted to elaborate a little bit, because some of what you guys are saying are some of the things we've started doing. After like a discovery phase, we have a charrette, including the development team that's going to work on it and try to come up with what are the features and sort of what's in their wheelhouse, what we can take from our library, what can we spend a little bit more time on and create something unique or special. And then we have all these like check-ins along the way where we do deliverables to the design team, where we come up with like the feature list, their user stories. And we have another check-in with wireframes, and we have another check-in with visual design, and then we do a full-on handoff and then QA. So like those have been very successful for us. I think one of our struggles has been our developers don't seem to have value or interest in so much like what the user experience is. They have a more practical approach and like very like this will work, this won't work, or this can fit, this won't fit. It's a little less creative and a little less best practice understanding. I wonder if there's something you all have from your experience that helped inspire you to understand or value UX in your work.
Okay, I'm unmuted first. I'm curious, do you, within your team, have a research group that conducts actual like user research studies that you can tune into?
A person. We have a person.
Okay. I think one of the best ways to get people's attention of what's working and what's not is to physically show them someone else using their app or their experience, right? I had started working on a prototype a couple years ago, and I still remember this moment of us being so sure that this new design we figured out and had created was just going to fail miserably, but we were so excited about it because we thought it was so cool. And then this other part that we were like, oh, that part's easy, they'll navigate through it, no problem. And the complete opposite thing happened in user testing, where the thing we thought they'd struggle with, they nailed. And the thing that we were like, oh, this is easy breezy, took like 10 minutes of us like sitting in the other room, in like the not real two-way glass, but like shouting at the mirror of just, oh my God, why don't they get this? And I feel like that's always a wake-up call for the designers, for the engineers to realize whatever you think, no offense, doesn't matter at the end of the day. It matters how people use your product. So if you can, you know, show them tangibly, this is what happens and this is why these things matter, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, I agree with that one, Emily and Alyssa. Sorry to stomp for a moment. Mine was a form, again, back in the COBOL days, where the engineer put the list of questions to answer and fields to fill out in a particular way. And I was working with the actual end users and saying they don't have that information in time. So I was filling out the form out of sequence and literally was able to break that page because I was not filling it out in the sequence that the program expected it. So it is that language of helping the engineer to understand what the end user is experiencing and why it's important to follow a particular order. Alyssa, I stomped on you, so I'll stop talking.
I was just saying thank you. Thank you as well.
Yeah, I saw that Angie actually dropped in the chat as well, talking about stand-ups, you know, led by a Scrum Master, and that includes the full team, you know, just to kind of increase awareness and help everybody kind of understand what each other is working on and get feedback on things. And that's actually exactly what I was going to say. We do the exact same thing. You know, I'm not gonna say we're agile, we're agile-ish. We have our flavor of agile, as most people do. But I think that constant communication and kind of like open dialogue of things, we also use Jira to go through and kind of keep conversations going outside of the traditional ceremonies. That's been a godsend as we've been working, particularly as we've been remote, to try and go through and just build accountability and awareness between the team as we're all kind of working on our own initiatives. To make sure that everybody is on the same page with things, that questions are being proactively discussed and kind of worked through. And you know, I think one of the things that we noticed when we started going through and opening the lines of communication and kind of knocking down some of those silos is that people do start to, it takes a little bit of an adjustment for sure, but people do generally like all want to go through and produce the best thing. And if that means going through and, you know, working and discussing through a problem, you know, with the different disciplines that they're working with, people are generally receptive to that as well once they start to understand a little bit more about what's going on around them as opposed to like just their bubble. I guess since I have the floor, do you feel good with that answer there, Alyssa?
I feel great. Those were very helpful, and I appreciate you guys contributing.
Awesome. I did see Christine dropped a message in the chat real quick. And she was asking, how do you manage balancing code and design? For the most part, they're separate lanes. How do you marry the two disciplines in your work in teams, especially for those of us learning both code and design, which is actually a really great question. You know, I would say from my side of things, since I have the floor at the moment, you know, we do have people that are specialized on our team. They, you know, we do have developers, we do have designers. We've been fortunate to be able to go through and hire a few hybridized people over the years as well, people that, you know, had a UX or design background and transitioned into development. You very much need to be in an environment that, you know, appreciates and fosters that kind of cross-disciplinary thought process, but that's something that has certainly helped. You know, I think in marrying the two things together, from my personal experience, it was really about going through and kind of just basically ignoring the lanes that you mentioned there. You know, I think the mistake that a lot of folks make is that feeling of going through and being like, oh, well, I'm the developer, I need to stay out of design's business. And there are unfortunately those kinds of environments still out there in the world where, you know, people are very protective of their lanes. But I think what you're seeing more and more these days, particularly in more open product and web development shops, is that people understand and appreciate the different perspectives that people can bring. So those open discussions, you know, sharing ideas about things. I think particularly if you start thinking of it in a way that is like specialization and things. Some of the ways that I was able to go through and break down those kind of pre-established silos, because we had those in the past. You know, it took us breaking them down to get to where we are right now. You know, was going through and basically introducing something that people hadn't thought of. You know, like the reason that I do so much analytics and SEO and performance and accessibility work is because those were natural conversations to go through and start to break down some of those barriers, because I was able to go through and speak of things that not just a developer can go through and solve. You know, like creating a good accessible experience requires all the disciplines getting together and coming up with the best solution possible. So there are certain topics that are natural bridges for these things that can help to go through and kind of start those conversations and ease people a little bit more into these cross-disciplinary conversations that are sometimes a little more challenging early in the process. Jay, Emily, not sure if you have any additional thoughts on that.
I just wanted to jump in real quick, guys, and give a 5-minute heads up. At 7:35, we'll be moving back to the main room to start our second session. You're more than welcome to come back into UX engineering. I'm loving the conversation here. And after that, you'll also be free to move around to other specializations. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up.
Thanks, Ben. I wanted to call out the possibility, since Christine, I think you've used language of being a new person learning things. Remember that you do have some control as you're going through the interview process and paying attention to who the company is that you're interviewing with. Make sure that they match your values, your goals. And so there are ways to listen for what they value and how they value them. Keep an ear open for red flags and yellow flags that may be warning you that you know, the company that sounds great on the surface, as you're going through the interview process, you suddenly get some kind of language that trashes UI or trashes code as being the unimportant thing. And you know, I've very specifically chosen the last couple companies because I wanted to make sure there was a clear fit for who I am and what my goals are, and it has paid off in multiple dividends by making sure that their philosophy and my philosophy match very closely.
I just want to add, if you do end up in a role that is more code focused than you were hoping or more design focused than you were hoping, that doesn't mean you're stuck there. And if you are surrounded by people, or even not, like if there is another team you're interested in, go reach out to those people and say, hey, I'm just curious what you're working on. Can you walk me through it? And try to find those opportunities to get more involved in whatever aspect you're missing out on, right? Whether it's design or code. We have a designer on my team who is amazing, and we have found there's a really great system where we can share our code with him, like do a screen share to work through animations and make sure that he's very involved in that process. He doesn't want to be a developer, but he wants to be involved. So I think there are always opportunities to, reach out to team members like that. Yeah, my clock says 7:35. I'm just waiting for us to suddenly get kicked out.
I was like, any moment now, it's going to happen.
Just trying to keep it short.
Well, if hopefully, I know if there are any other questions, hopefully you all come back. We'd love to see you again back here after the break. But if not, certainly feel free to wander around and check out the other groups. I know several of the other folks in the other groups as well, and there's a part of me that's very happy to be here with all of you, but there's a part of me that's like, man, I'll bet you they're having some really great conversations over there because they really know their stuff. So definitely take advantage if there's some other topics that interest you.